The wind tonight feels different. It hums through the valley, like a voice searching for something lost, brushing past the cabin walls, whispering names that only I can hear. The logs crack in the fireplace, but the warmth never truly reaches me. Atlas lies by the door, ears twitching to every distant sound, while Luna's breath fogs the cold air beside me. Out
You found
here
the
in the
tracks then?
spine of
The
the
prints lead
Montana
off the mountain.
mountains,
I need to
silence
follow 'em.
isn't
Hold on,
peace, it's
your
a waiting
dogs.
thing.
I heard a call on the
came
radio.
here years
Missing
ago
military
to disappear,
canines.
to live where no memories could find me. But the past is a persistent animal. It always knows the scent of home. Tonight, as the wind howls across the frozen creek, something cuts through it. A faint metallic cry, half human, half mechanical. Both dogs lift their heads, Atlas growls low, Luna tilts her head toward the dark. It's not an echo of the storm. It's something else. Something calling us. I grab the lantern, step outside, and the cold slams into me like a wall. The snow burns my face, the air sharp enough to taste blood. The sound comes again, closer now, like the breath of something dying beneath the ice. Atlas moves first, bounding toward the tree line, Luna right behind him. And then I see it, a pale glimmer, half buried in the drift, pulsing weakly under the frost. That's when I realize the storm wasn't the only thing that arrived tonight. So stay with me, because what Atlas, Luna, and I uncover out here will pull us into a story the mountains themselves tried to bury. And if you believe in second chances, you might want to hear this one through. The light from my lantern trembled across the snow, and for a heartbeat I thought the glimmer before me was only ice catching the firelight. But when I knelt and brushed away the frozen crust, my hand met something softer, fur stiff, with frost tangled with blood and sleet. Atlas whined, circling tight, nose pressed to the ground. Luna let out a low cry, part sorrow, part warning. Beneath my gloves I felt a faint pulse. Faint, but there. It wasn't one body. There were two dogs, one dark, one pale, as smoke curled together, half buried by the storm. Their eyes fluttered open at my touch, just long enough for me to see the reflection of my own lantern flicker in them. That look, I'd seen it before, years ago on the battlefield. The look of a soldier who doesn't expect to be saved. I wrapped them in my coat and staggered back through the whiteout, each step sinking deep. The cabin lights looked impossibly far away, a flickering dot swallowed by the storm. My breath came in bursts of fog and fire, the two dogs hanging limp against my chest like fallen comrades. Atlas and Luna stayed close, their bodies forming a moving wall against the wind. Inside, I kicked the door shut and dropped to my knees by the hearth. The fire was low, but it would do. I laid the newcomers down on the rug and tore off the frozen coats from their backs. Their fur was thick, but underneath, thin ribs, scarred flesh, and frostbite creeping along their paws. Luna fetched the blanket from the corner without being told. Atlas stood guard by the window, his breath fogging the glass. For a long time, the only sound was the crackle of pine wood and the labored rhythm of breathing. I poured water into an old tin bowl and nudged it close. One of them, black, with streaks of silver, lifted his head just enough to drink. The other, a smaller one with a pale muzzle, didn't move at all until I rubbed warmth into her chest. Then slowly her lungs shuddered back to life. They were no ordinary strays. The moment I touched the back of the dark one's neck, I felt the ridge of a scar, not from a fight, but surgical, deliberate. A clean line that only a blade or scalpel could leave. Beneath the fur, my fingers brushed metal, something small, like a chip embedded under the skin. My stomach tightened. I'd seen this kind of work before, long ago, in places where mercy never reached. The storm raged outside, but the real noise was inside my head. Who would mark an animal like that? And why I bandaged their paws with strips torn from an old blanket. The pale one, the female, let out a faint whimper when I touched her flank. There was another scar there, long and deliberate, tracing the curve of her ribs. A chill that had nothing to do with the cold swept through me. Atlas gave a low growl. His gaze was fixed on the window, ears sharp. I turned, expecting to see only snow, but for a moment I thought I saw something else. A faint light between the trees. Not lightning, not reflection. A cold, steady beam that moved. I stood perfectly still. The storm swallowed it a moment later, but my instincts were already awake, the ones the war had carved into my bones. Someone or something was out there. I checked the locks, stoked the fire, and dimmed the lantern. The dogs huddled near the hearth now, their bodies trembling less with cold and more with memory. I knew that tremor, the kind that came not from fear but from remembering fear too well. When the storm finally began to fade, dawn pressed weak light through the frosted windows. The mountains stood silent again, wrapped in the heavy stillness that comes after chaos. I brewed coffee, the smell of bitter smoke filling the small room. The two rescues were sleeping now, though uneasily. Their ears twitched at every sound. Their paws kicked at ghosts I couldn't see. It was only when I bent down to check their bandages that I saw it barely visible beneath the matted fur behind the ear of the black one. A mark. Not a random scratch, not nature's doing. A tattoo. 3 letters. Faded but clear. K7. I froze. It wasn't just a number, it was a designation. Military. Experimental. Controlled. I'd seen similar markings once when I was stationed overseas during the cleanup of a facility that never existed. Atlas moved closer, his nose brushing the strange mark, then looked at me as if asking what I already feared to answer. Luna gave a short bark, anxious. That mark didn't belong to a lost pet. It belonged to a project. A ghost of something man-made. I sat back, running a hand over my face. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. I'd brought something into my home I didn't understand, and yet a part of me couldn't let them die out there. Soldiers don't walk away from the wounded, even when the battlefield has changed. The storm passed by noon, leaving a silence that pressed on the windows like a held breath. Outside the world was unrecognizable. Trees bowed with snow, the path to the woodshed erased. The dogs mine and the newcomers ate in uneasy peace. Atlas watched them constantly, his instincts conflicted between protection and suspicion. Luna seemed gentler, creeping close to nudge the pale one's shoulder. For a moment their eyes met, something quiet passed between them. Recognition maybe. Or understanding. I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd been somewhere together before all this. That they'd seen the same darkness I had. Later that day I stepped outside to check the tracks near the tree line. Most were gone, swallowed by the storm. But one set of prints remained half buried, but human heavy boots leading up the slope and disappearing toward the ridge. I followed them only a few yards before the wind picked up again. It wasn't smart to chase ghosts unarmed. Back in the cabin, the newcomers were awake. Their eyes followed me with unsettling precision. Not the gaze of animals wondering who I was, but of beings who were measuring me, waiting for my next move. "Easy," I murmured. "You're safe here." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. As night fell, I sat by the fire, journal in hand. I hadn't written in years, not since I left the service. The words came haltingly at first, then faster. 2 dogs found in the storm. Not strays. Marked. Possible tracking implants. Someone might come looking. The scratch of my pen sounded too loud in the stillness. Outside, a branch cracked in the woods. Atlas lifted his head, growled once, then went quiet. Luna pressed closer to the fire. I checked the window again. Nothing. Only snow and shadow. But deep down I knew the truth. The world doesn't let go of its secrets easily. And whatever I'd pulled out of that blizzard, it wasn't finished with me yet. I doused the lamps, sat in the dark, and listened to the rhythm of their breathing. 4 lives under one roof, all bound by something none of us could name yet. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone. But it didn't feel like safety. It felt like the calm before the second storm. And somewhere beyond the ridge, under that endless white sky, someone was watching. Morning came late in the mountains. The kind of morning that doesn't rise, it crawls. The fire had long gone out, but Atlas's low growl woke me before the cold did. He was staring at the window again, hackles raised. Luna stood beside him, silent but alert, her tail stiff as a rifle barrel. I moved quietly, brushing frost off the glass. Outside, the snow lay smooth, untouched, except for a single pair of boot prints leading toward the cabin. Not fresh, half-filled by drift, but they hadn't been there yesterday. Someone had come close during the night. Close enough to look in. I dressed fast, slung my coat over my shoulder, and followed the trail until it vanished into the tree line. No vehicle tracks, no smoke, just the smell of exhaust faint on the wind. Whoever it was, they'd been watching, and they'd left knowing exactly where to find me. By the time I got back, the coffee pot was hissing, and Luna was pacing circles around the two rescues. The black one, the one marked K7, was standing now, limping but steady. The female stayed close to the fire, her pale eyes following me with a strange intensity. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. When I reached for the radio, its power light blinked once, then died. The lines were cut. Someone had tampered with it. I didn't have to look far to confirm it. Behind the cabin near the fuel drum, the cable was cleanly sliced, edges melted as if by heat. Whoever they were, they didn't just want to watch. They wanted to silence. That's when I decided to go into town. It had been months since I'd driven down the ridge. The roads were narrow and buried, but the truck would make it. I needed supplies, maybe information, and a reason to pretend life was still normal. Atlas jumped into the bed of the truck before I even called him. Luna followed, tail wagging once more out of duty than joy. The two rescues stayed behind, curled up in the cabin's warmth, as if they knew better than to show themselves. The drive down was long and silent. The forest leaned in from both sides, branches drooping with snow heavy enough to snap bone. Every mile felt like a question the mountain didn't want me to answer. When I reached the first patch of civilization, a half-frozen gas station, I spotted a sheriff's cruiser parked by the pumps. I almost turned around right there. He saw me first. Sheriff Branson. Thick mustache, heavy belt, the kind of small-town lawman whose handshake feels like a test. "Well, look who came down from the ridge," he said. "Been a while, Jonas." I nodded. "Needed fuel." He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "Heard the storm hit hard up there. You keepin' warm, I manage." He leaned against my truck, scanning the back where Atlas and Luna Saturday. "Two fine animals you've got. Didn't know you had a pair." I didn't. Not till recently. "Find them in the snow." His tone was casual, too casual. I didn't answer. He adjusted his hat, the badge glinting dull gold in the pale light. "Strange thing," he went on, "some folks out near the research site reported missing canines. Military kind. Real valuable. Government property, they say." I stared at him. "That's so, yep, got a call about it just yesterday. Thought I'd ask around." He let the silence hang between us, thick as smoke. Then he tapped the side of my truck. "Be sure to keep those dogs safe. Wouldn't want anyone thinking you've got what's theirs." I left, without another word. But the road back felt shorter somehow, like the mountain wanted me home before I asked more questions. By the time I reached the cabin, dusk was falling again. The rescues were waiting at the door, restless. The black one barked, once sharp and low. On the table lay something that hadn't been there before, a folded sheet of paper, damp from melted snow, tucked under the door. No tracks outside. No sound of approach, just the note. I unfolded it carefully. Inside, written in a precise, cold hand. "If you want to know what they are, meet me at Miller's Crossing. Tomorrow, noon. Come alone." No signature. The name Miller's Crossing hit something deep in my memory. A bridge 20 miles north, once used for military convoys during winter training. Abandoned now. Or it should have been. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside felt amplified, the groan of trees, the whisper of snow sliding off the roof. The two rescues lay side by side near the fire, eyes open, watching the door. Atlas and Luna stayed close to me, as if they understood the gravity of what waited. When morning came, I left the cabin armed. My old service rifle, 3 clips of flare, and the photograph I'd kept from the war, the one that reminded me why I'd walked away from everything. Atlas rode up front this time. Luna took the back seat, restless. The road to Miller's Crossing wound through a canyon carved by centuries of ice. The bridge came into view slowly, a steel skeleton, half swallowed by mist. Someone was already there. A woman standing by the guardrail, coat pulled tight, a scarf whipping in the wind. She raised a hand. "Jonas Keene." Her voice carried the calm authority of someone used to giving orders quietly. I nodded, but didn't lower the rifle. "My name's Mara," she said. I used to work for the people who owned those dogs. I studied her face. Tired eyes. No makeup. Not law enforcement, but not civilian either. You put that note under my door, she nodded. You were being watched. Still are. By who? By everyone who wants the past to stay buried. She pulled something from her bag, a flash drive sealed in plastic. I can't show you much here. But those dogs? They're part of an old program. Behavioral augmentation. Combat enhancement. They were supposed to be decommissioned years ago. Supposed to. They were too effective, so they were repurposed. I felt the words land heavy. Repurposed. How? As weapons, she said simply. Fully autonomous, trainable, loyal to command and disposable. The markings you saw, K7. That's a series code. You've got the last 2 prototypes. For a long moment the only sound was the creak of the bridge. Then she added, almost softly, they weren't meant to survive the shutdown. Someone tried to erase them, and anyone who knew. Atlas growled low. Mara's eyes flicked to him, then to the horizon. They'll come for you next. The sheriff is one of them. His department cleans up the leaks. I should have been afraid, but what I felt instead was something colder, a soldier's clarity. Why tell me? Because I couldn't watch them die again, she said. You saved them once. Maybe you can save what's left of this story. Before I could speak, she turned. A black SUV had appeared at the far end of the bridge, lights off, crawling forward. Go, she hissed. They found us. The next moments blurred the snap of tires on ice, the echo of engines. I fired once into the air, the sound cracking across the gorge. Atlas barked. Luna jumped into the cab. Mara shoved the drive into my hand. Don't trust anyone in town, she shouted. If you survive, go to the ranger station by Frost Creek. The old one. He kept everything there. Then she ran into the fog. I hit the gas. The truck fishtailed across the frozen road, snow spraying up like smoke. Through the mirror I saw headlights split the mist, gaining ground. I turned down the logging path, praying the old trail still led somewhere. For miles I drove blind, the world reduced to the beam of my headlights and the sound of Atlas's heavy breathing beside me. When I finally stopped, the mountain was silent again, but it wasn't peace. It was a silence that listened. Inside my pocket, the flash drive felt heavier than a bullet. Whatever truth lay beneath the snow, it wasn't just mine anymore. And for the first time, I understood some things aren't buried by time, they're buried by design. By the time I reached the cabin again, night had already swallowed the ridge. The sky burned in streaks of copper behind the tree line, one of those false sunsets that come before a storm. I parked the truck by instinct, headlights off, and sat there for a long moment listening. The mountain was too quiet. No wind, no birds. Even the creek had gone still under its skin of ice. Atlas whined once, uneasy. Luna stared at the cabin door, her ears flat, tail stiff. The hairs on my arms lifted. Something was wrong. I stepped out, boots sinking into the snow's crust, and reached the porch. The door was ajar, just a sliver, but I knew I'd locked it that morning. I pushed it open slowly, rifle ready. The air inside was cold. Too cold. The fire had died, and the smell that hung in the room wasn't smoke, it was gasoline. For 1 second my brain refused to name it. Then the world exploded. A thunderclap of heat and pressure tore through the cabin, slamming me backward into the snow. My ears rang. The stars above blurred and wheeled. Atlas lunged over me, barking, snapping at sparks that rained down from the burning roof. Luna's howl cut through everything. The sound of something pure breaking. I scrambled to my feet. The fire spread fast, feeding on dry pine and kerosene. My home, the one place left that felt like mine, was a roaring wall of orange. Through the smoke I saw movement, figures at the edge of the trees, dark shapes against the light. They weren't watching. They were making sure the job was done. I fired once, twice, blindly. The shots echoed across the ridge. The shadows scattered, leaving only the fire's crackle and the heavy breath of the dogs. The air shimmered with heat, flakes of ash drifting like black snow. My eyes stung and every breath tasted like metal. Inside, the ceiling groaned. Flames licked across the beams. There was no saving it. Go, I shouted. Atlas and Luna hesitated, torn between obedience and protection. Then a beam cracked and fell, spraying embers across the floor. That broke the spell. They bolted through the open door, and I followed, stumbling into the night air as the cabin collapsed behind me with a sound like the end of a heartbeat. The shock came after. Standing in the snow, watching everything I owned burn to ash. The photographs, the journals, the fragments of peace I'd built. I felt something twist inside me. It wasn't grief. It was clarity. They weren't just cleaning up a project. They were erasing me. I grabbed the truck keys and the flash drive Mara had given me. It was still in the glove compartment, wrapped in a rag. The fire's glow reached the road as I started the engine. The dogs jumped in, panting, eyes wide. The first bullet hit the back window. Glass burst inward. I ducked and hit the gas tires, spinning on the ice. A second shot rang out, then a third, hitting the tailgate with a metallic scream. Headlights flared in the rearview mirror, two vehicles dark, no plates. They followed without hesitation. The mountain road twisted downward, narrow and slick. I drove like a man possessed, headlights off, trusting muscle memory and madness. Atlas braced himself on the seat beside me, growling with every impact. Luna crouched low, trembling but ready. The world became flashes, ice pine sparks from the chassis scraping against rock. I could hear the engines behind us closer every second. They weren't trying to scare me. They meant to drive me off the cliff. The old bridge came up ahead, Miller's Crossing. Half-rotted, covered in snow. I didn't slow down. As I hit the boards, the truck shuddered, groaned, but held. Behind me, tires screeched. One of the SUVs swerved, slammed into the railing, and vanished into the gorge below. The sound faded into nothing. The second car braked hard, headlights, cutting off suddenly. Silence. Then, just the wind again. I kept driving until the ridge fell behind me, and the road leveled out into the frozen valley. My hands shook on the wheel. The truck smelled of smoke and fear. When I finally stopped, we were miles away, an open field, moonlight glinting off the snow. I got out, knees weak, and leaned against the hood. My home was gone. My name maybe soon after. But the flash drive was still in my pocket, burning like a brand. Whatever they wanted buried was now the only thing left I could protect. Atlas pressed his head against my leg, whining softly. Luna rested beside him, watching the horizon, where the smoke still bled into the sky. I knew then, this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about finishing what someone else had started. I couldn't go back. There was nothing to go back to. The wind carried the smell of burned wood all the way down the valley, faint but inescapable. I thought of Mara, if she'd made it off the bridge, or if she was lying somewhere under that same smoke. I thought of the people who'd trained those dogs, who'd turned loyalty into a weapon and conscience into code. I thought of the man I used to be, who followed orders without asking why. The night closed around us, cold and clear. I loaded my rifle, checked the map she'd marked, and started walking. The ranger station by Frost Creek was 20 miles north, and if what she'd said was true, it held the last pieces of the truth, the kind they'd kill to keep quiet. Atlas led the way, nose low, every step deliberate. Luna stayed close to my side, her fur brushing my coat like a silent promise. Behind us, far away, something exploded again, the echo of another fire, maybe another erasure. The mountains glowed red for an instant, then went black. And I realized the storm wasn't over. It had just changed its shape. I tightened my grip on the rifle and whispered to the night, "They can burn the cabin, but they can't burn what's coming next." The road to Frost Creek was half buried, a thin scar of ice winding through the pines. By the time the first light broke, I'd already been walking for hours. My legs ached, my coat stank of smoke, and the air tasted like iron and memory. Atlas moved ahead, cutting through the drifts with the confidence of a creature born to lead. Luna stayed close, her blue eyes flicking toward every shadow. The mountains had gone quiet again, too quiet, the way they do after something violent. When we reached the ranger station, I almost didn't recognize it. It wasn't a station anymore, just a skeleton of wood and glass leaning against the wind. Half the roof had caved in, the front door hung off its hinges, and the windows were webbed with frost. But there was one sign of life tracks. Human. Fresh. I raised the rifle and called out Mara. The silence held its breath. Then a shape moved behind the window. She stepped out slowly, wrapped in a wool coat far too thin for the cold. Her face was pale, tired, but alive. "You made it," she said. "Barely," I replied. She nodded toward the ridge, where a column of smoke still stained the horizon. "They burned you out." "They did," I said, "but they didn't get what they came for." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and laid it on the table inside. The cabin's interior was lined with old ranger maps and filing cabinets covered in dust. A single oil lamp burned in the corner, its light trembling over the walls. Mara took the drive and slid it into a small laptop. The screen flickered to life, the hum of its fan the only sound in the room. "Before they shut the program down," she said quietly, "a few of us tried to copy what we could, not to sell, just to make sure it wasn't lost forever." "What kind of program?" I asked. She turned the laptop toward me. Lines of documents appeared, blueprints, test reports, grainy photos of dogs in steel cages. "Project K9 Genesis," she said. "They were built as companions for soldiers' first search and rescue trauma response. But the funding changed. They wanted obedience, not empathy. They wanted perfect control." I stared at the screen. Each image hit like a hammer, dogs wired with sensors, eyes glazed handlers standing behind mirrored glass. "Those marks on their necks," I murmured, "they weren't just identification." "No," she said. "They were command receivers, neural link implants. With a voice code, they could override instincts, make them attack, retreat, or die on cue." The words landed heavy. I looked at Atlas and Luna, lying by the doorway, their heads low. And beyond them, the two rescues I'd saved from the snow, now resting together under a blanket. Their scars, their fear, it all made sense now. They weren't strays. They were survivors of an experiment that someone decided should never see daylight. Mara leaned back, her eyes hollow. When the program was terminated, they destroyed the remaining subjects. But a few escaped transport during the shutdown. I think yours were two of them. Maybe the last. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear my own heartbeat, the faint drip of melted snow from the roof. I remembered the night I found them, the way the storm seemed to call me out there, the way Atlas had looked back, as if already knowing what we'd find. Maybe fate wasn't random after all. Maybe it was debt. Mara spoke again, softer now. "You have to decide, Jonas. We can take this evidence public, but once we do, they'll come harder. They'll erase anyone tied to it, including you." I looked at her, at the laptop, at the fire, flickering in the corner. "If we stay quiet, it happens again. Maybe not to dogs this time. Maybe to people." She didn't argue. She just handed me a small metal case, one of the old project tags, engraved with the symbol I'd seen branded behind K7's ear. "They called them Sentinels," she said, "guardians of the silent war. But in the end, they were just abandoned soldiers like us." Her words cut deep. I thought of my own unit of faces I hadn't seen since the day the orders stopped making sense. We'd all been told the same lie, that obedience was duty, that silence was loyalty. But silence had burned my home to the ground, and loyalty had become another word for control. Outside, the sky had gone gray again, snow drifting in slow, patient spirals. I sat down by the dogs, running my hand through Atlas's fur. His scars were lighter now, but they told a longer story, one of survival against design. Luna pressed her nose into my palm, her warmth grounding me in the moment. Mara closed the laptop and slid it across the table. "You're the only one who can carry this now," she said. "You know how to move unseen. You know what they'll do if they catch you." "Where do I go?" I asked. "North," she said. "There's a journalist in Fairbanks. Name's Keller. He helped leak the first files before they vanished. He'll know how to finish it." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The wind pressed against the windows like a restless spirit. Somewhere deep inside, I felt the quiet turning of something, fear becoming purpose. I stood slinging the rifle over my shoulder, the laptop secure in my pack. "If they find us before dawn, don't wait," I told her. "Take the drives and run." She smiled faintly. "I've been running my whole life, Jonas. Maybe it's time I stand." I nodded, then stepped into the cold. The air hit like a baptism, sharp, clean, unforgiving. The kind of cold that burns truth into your skin. Atlas and Luna followed their paws silent on the snow. Behind us, the lamp in the ranger station flickered once and went out. Ahead, the northern sky stretched wide and endless, the horizon glowing faintly with the first hint of aurora. For the first time since the war, I felt something I hadn't dared to name in years' direction. And somewhere deep beneath the frozen earth, I swear I could hear it again. That same metallic heartbeat from the night of the storm. Only now I understood what it meant. The truth wasn't buried under the snow. It was alive, and it was calling us forward. We reached Fairbanks just before dawn, a town half buried in frost and exhaust smoke, where the streetlights buzzed like dying stars. I hadn't slept in 2 days. My hands were cracked, the knuckles raw from gripping the wheel too long. Atlas and Luna had stopped barking at passing trucks. Now they just watched the road ahead, silent, waiting. There was something about their stillness that kept me steady, as if they knew this was the last stretch of the road we were meant to walk. Mara had stayed behind at Frost Creek, her last words still echoing in my head. "Bring it to the light, Jonas, even if it burns." The journalist's office was hidden in the back of an old post-war print shop. A flickering sign hung above the door, Keller and Sons Press. Inside, the air smelled of ink and dust of paper that had seen too much truth. He was waiting for me, mid-40s, gray beard, wire glasses, the kind of man who looked like he'd been carrying the world's secrets alone for too long. "You're keen," he said quietly. I nodded. "You were expecting me," Mara called, he replied. "Said you've got something worth dying for." I handed him the flash drive. He plugged it in without hesitation. The screen filled with images, the same blueprints, the same reports, but now accompanied by audio files, logs, testimonies of handlers who'd refused to follow orders. The words were cold, procedural, monstrous. Subject K7 shows improved obedience under sustained stimulus. Emotional resistance eliminated. Each line hit harder than a bullet. Keller's jaw tightened. "Jesus," he whispered. They called this progress. I didn't answer. I was watching Atlas and Luna by the doorway. Atlas's eyes had the same steady patience as soldiers. I once commanded, the kind who'd seen too much to flinch. Luna sat beside him, tail sweeping the floor, once, twice, like she understood the gravity of what we were about to do. Keller turned the monitor toward me. "If we release this," he said, "it's not just the program that goes down. It's everyone tied to it, the contractors, the funding boards, the sheriffs, the senators. You ready for that?" I looked at the screen again. The faces of men and women in lab coats stared back, confident, clinical, untouched by the pain they'd created. "They burned my home," I said. "They killed to hide this. And they'll keep doing it, unless someone finally makes them look in the mirror." Keller nodded once. "Then we don't wait. We go live." He moved fast, setting up multiple uplinks through old encrypted servers. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from urgency, like a man lighting a fuse and praying it burned clean. As the upload began, I felt something strange, the weight I'd been carrying for years. All the silence, the guilt, the isolation starting to lift. But the reprieve didn't last. Headlights sliced across the frosted windows. A black van stopped outside, followed by 2 more. Keller froze. They found us. The next minutes were a blur. Shouts, boots crunching snow, the front door splintering under the weight of impact. Keller grabbed the hard drives, shoving them into a steel box. "It's uploading," he hissed. "Buy me 30 seconds." I took position by the side window, rifle raised. Atlas growled, low muscles coiled. Luna moved to the rear door, ready to spring. The first agent through the door barely had time to shout before I fired, not to kill, but to scatter. The flash of muzzle fire lit the room like a storm. Smoke filled the air. Keller yelled, "It's done, it's online." I didn't need to see the screen to know he was right. Somewhere in the world, someone was already downloading the truth. We ran out the back, through the alley, into the pale blue of morning. The agents didn't follow. Maybe they knew it was too late. Or maybe they were waiting for orders from men who had just lost their power. By the time the sun rose fully, we were miles outside town, standing on a ridge that overlooked the frozen river. Keller's laptop pinged once, a tiny sound in the vast silence. "It's spreading," he said. "News sites, archives, whistleblower feeds, it's everywhere." He turned to me, eyes shining behind his glasses. "You did it." But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. I looked down at Atlas and Luna, the last two survivors of a story that should never have been written. They stood side by side, staring toward the horizon where the first light touched the snow. In that moment I realized something. This wasn't just justice. It was resurrection. The past had burned, but in its ashes, something honest was growing. Fragile, yes, but real. Keller left soon after, heading south to hide. I stayed by the river. The cold didn't bite anymore. The air smelled clean, almost new. Atlas nudged my hand, his fur rough against my skin. Luna leaned into my leg, eyes soft and steady. I thought of the soldiers who'd never come home, of the scientists who'd played God, of the people who'd kept quiet to survive. And I thought of the dogs not as weapons but as witnesses. They hadn't been created to obey. They'd been created to remind us of what we'd lost: trust, compassion, the ability to stand beside one another without fear. When I finally spoke, my voice came out low, almost a whisper. "They called you K7, I said to Atlas. "But that's not your name. Not anymore." He tilted his head, waiting. "Your name means guardian," I told him. "Not soldier. Guardian of what's left." Luna barked once, as if sealing the promise. The wind shifted, then carrying with it the faint hum of distant rotors. News drones, maybe circling the site of the raid. The story was already out. The world would know. I stood there until the light broke fully across the snow, painting everything gold. The river shone like liquid fire, the trees glimmered with frost, and for the first time in years I felt warmth that had nothing to do with flame. I turned to the dogs and smiled. "Let's go home," I said. Not to rebuild the cabin that burned, not to chase ghosts, but to start again somewhere the world couldn't find us, somewhere silence could finally mean peace, not fear. As we walked north, the sun climbed higher, melting the first thin layers of ice along the riverbank. The air was clear, bright, alive, and behind us, the echoes of what was lost faded into something softer. Not an ending, a beginning written in pawprints and breath beneath a sky that no longer felt heavy. The world feels quieter now. Not silent in the way the mountains used to be. Not empty, but peaceful, like the hush that follows a storm after it has said all it needed to say. The snow has begun to melt along the valley, carving small rivers that glint like veins of light beneath the Sunday. I watch them from the porch of the new cabin we built. Smaller, simpler, but somehow more alive. Atlas lies at my feet, head resting on his paws. Luna sleeps nearby, her fur catching the morning glow like spun silver. Every now and then, she twitches, not from nightmares anymore, but from dreams. I like to believe they're the good kind. It's been months since Fairbanks. The world changed faster than I expected. The files spread everywhere, copied, shared, archived. People wanted to know if the story was real. Some denied it. Some called it propaganda. But a few, just enough, believed. Investigations started. Hearings reopened, men in suits, forced to answer questions they never thought they'd hear out loud. I didn't stay to see it. My fight ended when truth found its own way into the light. I had nothing left to prove, only something left to live for. Some nights I still wake to the echo of that first explosion, the cabin burning, the world collapsing into fire and ash. But when I open my eyes, I see Atlas's silhouette by the door, ears pricked toward the forest. I see Luna pressed against me, her breathing steady, grounding me in the present. And I remember survival is its own kind of defiance. Mara writes sometimes. She keeps it brief, just coordinates fragments of updates. The last message read, "They're rebuilding the sanctuary. Not for experiments this time, for rehabilitation." That one made me smile. Maybe redemption is contagious. I've thought a lot about what justice really means since all this began. It's not the loud victory people think it is. It's quiet, fragile. It's in the simple act of choosing to do right when no one's watching, of refusing to let fear decide who you become. I used to believe the war had taken everything from me, My brothers in arms, my peace, my purpose. But maybe it didn't take, maybe it only stripped away the noise until all that was left was truth. And in that truth I found these two souls, Atlas and Luna, who reminded me that loyalty isn't obedience, it's love with no condition. They say the mountains keep secrets, but I think they also keep promises. The night I found those dogs, the storm tried to bury them. Maybe it was trying to bury me too, but we clawed our way back together, one breath at a time. Maybe that's what all survival really is, not defiance but faith. Faith that what's broken can still mean something. The snow begins to fall again now, gentle, this time soft enough to disappear the moment it touches the wood. Atlas lifts his head and watches ears twitching. Luna stirs, opens one eye, and gives a low, contented sigh. I reach down, running my hand through their fur. The world feels different beneath my fingers, warmer somehow, as if all the pain we carried finally found somewhere to rest. I look out toward the horizon, where the sun edges over the peaks, and I whisper not a prayer, not a vow, but something simpler. Thank you. For the storm that led me here, for the fire that forced me to see, for the two lives that refused to give up when I did. The air smells of pine and smoke and second chances. Somewhere in the distance a raven cries sharp and wild, a reminder that the world moves on, that life keeps its rhythm even after all the noise fades. And I realize something I never could, when the fighting never stopped. Peace isn't the absence of war. It's the choice to stay kind in a world that taught you how to hate. The dogs stir again, stretching ready for another day in a world that no longer hunts us. I rise, take my coat, and open the door. The cold greets me like an old friend. We step outside together, three silhouettes against the morning light. The snow crunches under our boots and paws. The sun climbs higher, and for the first time in a long, long while, I feel no need to look back. Some stories don't end where the fire dies, they linger, like footprints fading in the snow, waiting for someone to follow them. I thought mine was over when the truth came out, when Atlas, Luna, and I finally found peace among these mountains. But lately, strange things have started happening again. Distant lights moving where no road exists. Static on the radio, carrying a voice that shouldn't be alive. Maybe the past doesn't stay buried, after all. Maybe some ghosts refuse to rest until the whole truth is known. If this journey has reached you, if you felt the storm, the loss, the quiet hope that carried us through, share this story. Leave your thoughts below and tell me, what do you think waits beyond Frost Creek? Because the world believes this story is over. But Atlas hears something in the night again. And next time, when we follow that sound, we might uncover something far darker than a secret. Something still watching. Stay with us. The next chapter is already whispering in the snow.